All right, guys. Well, let's move on to the main sort of discussion today, which is George Martin's The Ice
Yeah.
Dragon. So, it was written it came out in 1980.
Hmm.
So a long time, actually. I think like 16 years, because Game of Thrones comes out in like 96, I believe.
Yeah.
So you're talking this came out 16 years before a Game of Thrones. Now, I will say, George has confirmed several times it is not in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, although many publishers will incorrectly say that it is. That includes Amazon, Barnes and Noble. All of them will say it is part of the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, although he specifically said it's not. But where it gets really interesting is you can just see so many of the ideas of this. I mean, if you told me that this did take place like centuries ago or like thousands of years ago in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, it literally fits in 100%. I mean, it so easily just fits in 100%. But it is sort of it's its own book, but you can see so many of the original ideas in here, and so it is kind of teased, I guess, more so. It's kind of presented more as sort of like a kids sort of book, meant for like a younger audience. It's not very long. I have it here. You can get it. You can get it for like $10 on Amazon. And so the version I have here does have like nice illustrations as well. And so it's a pretty easy read. It's only like 40 minutes on Audible, so it's not very long. And they are making they're making an animated version that will be coming out on HBO Max here, I think, in the next year or so. They've been working on it for a little bit. It's pretty cool. And we're just going to kind of review it a little bit here. I mean, Jimmy, you're kind of the book review expert, so I might let you kind of go first. I thought maybe we would just sort of look at it as its own story and then move into so much of the connections between it and A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a book I read late last year, and I kind of just fit it into my TBR when I could. And I never actually got to post a review for it on my channel on the Fantasy Nuttwork. So I'm actually really excited to talk about it a little bit more. But, we have our main character, and go figure, it's a little girl who happens to end up having a relationship with a dragon, which her name is Adara. And essentially the land that she is in, there is a lot of war. It almost seems like a civil war, if I recall correctly. And you have the fiery dragons up in the north, which is reversed from Game of Thrones, right? And then she's in this more of the southern part, which has an ice dragon that's floating around. He's like a mythical creature. No one can tame the ice dragon. So all the wars are being fought as the north comes down with fiery dragons, our typical dragons. And Adara is considered a winter child. So she's different from everyone else. She does not weep. She does not laugh. She does not have fun. A very cold child, which as you're listening to this, I know as you're listening to this, you are hearing kind of some things that you could connect to A Song of Ice and Fire, which we'll get to. But essentially, Adara is the one that can tame the ice dragon. And I don't think we don't want to give away spoilers, or do we? Do we care? Do we not?
Oh, I think
I think we'll give away some. It's not very long. It's only 100 pages, guys. I mean,
That's all right. Then you are set
right.
with that synopsis. Just know that the internal conflict happens to be with the relationship with the ice dragon, also compared to her family, who has not always been fair to her. And George has a quote that I have here, and this is something I think about every time I start a George book, because I've read a lot of George's other works other than The Song of Ice and Fire, and I love his writing. I also think, by the way, that Ice Dragon is beautifully written. It's very poetic. The illustrations are top notch, like literally top
awesome.
notch.
The illustrations are really good. Yeah,
it's worth the have for the money for sure. But this is a quote from George R. R. Martin. And it says, "I've always agreed with William Faulkner. He said that the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. I've always taken that as my guiding principle, and the rest is just set dressing." And I think that is 100% when you look at the Ice Dragon, even though it's a kid's story, it is compelling. And, you know, we actually do see a little bit of the fallout from the wartime of people coming back home from the war and they're missing limbs and they're beat up and stuff. So even though it's a kid's book, there's still like that weight to it that George likes to put. And I really felt that the human heart in conflict concept was on display here, even in this novel. And that's with all of his works. I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire is essentially all these amazing characters at conflict with their own hearts at all times, right? Like Tyrion and his family, but trying to do the right things. I mean, it's on display all the time there. But with this story, it is at the forefront as well. And I think that's what makes it a very compelling story.
Yeah, I think so. Adara from beginning to end, and we're not to. We'll stop kind of the non-spoiler here, and we'll go into spoiler probably here in just a second after this. So folks know, because there is some stuff like throughout this book that I kept just thinking, oh my God, the imagery I was getting was Game of Thrones. It was A Song of Ice and Fire, but Adara, yeah, from start to finish, the whole overarching arc goes directly to what Jimmy just read to you guys. That quote, the conflict, that self-reflection, like the heart kind of trying to sort through predicaments and obstacles and things that you kind of have to overcome. That is what Adara and family and other individuals in the story are facing in this overarching, story. And yeah, I think it's great. I just read it this morning, just so you guys know, and I was listening to it. It really is only a 47-minute listen, so it's very short. So I just got up and said, all right, let's give this a go. And there were so many times as I was listening, I could let me give you an example here real quick. So I want to read something. Is it okay if I read something real quick, Sir Matt here? I'm going to just jump into some of the, I get the PDF
absolutely.
Here.
Go ahead.
All right. So this is Adara. She always knew she always knew when they were due because of her birthday. Adara was a winter child. This is what Jimmy was talking about. Born during the worst freeze that anyone could remember. Even old Laura, and I wanted to say even old Nan, right? So who had lived on the next farm and remembered things that had happened before anyone else was born. People still talked about that freeze. Adara often heard them. So it reminded me of, there's old Laura, just substitute old Nan. I mean, those ideas, 20 years prior, however many years prior this was to the writing of A Game of Thrones, they're all there. And he said this, George has said these ideas have been bouncing around in his mind for a long time. And then he merges it with, is it the Hadrian's Wall, right? The wall idea, the imagery, like he has these visuals, and he says, you know what? I like that. I also like what I did with the Ice Dragon. He starts to kind of, build these things. And there's just so many times. How many times did winter fall? Or winter fell during the first opening chapter? I was like, winter kept, it was just so cool. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that you said old Nan, because old Nan mentions the Ice Dragon.
Yes, exactly.
She does.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, I guess for me, just in sort of like a quick sort of book review of it on its own, one of the things I guess I kind of took away from it, and then obviously all of the stuff, its connections to Game of Thrones and stuff like that. But I guess it's something I think we're sort of beneficial, obviously, that we all are from the United States, because it is the story of a girl, and she is younger, I would say, than Arya, even. Although Arya kind of lives this as well, is like Arya in the Game of Thrones is traveling through, especially like Clash of Kings, she's traveling through this war-torn country, right? And she's having to live that on the run as a little girl. Now, Adara has it a little bit better because she is with her family, but they're talking about like we may have to leave, like we may have, lose our home, and all of this stuff. And she seems like she's so much younger, so you get sort of that like innocence of her, and she's got like the Ice Dragon there too, this sort of mythical creature, so she has that kind of going. But I don't know, I just kept thinking about her as this like little girl that like all of this war is going on, and as you said, people are losing limbs and people are dying and not coming home, and she's like going through that. I was just kind of thinking about like here we are, like the United States, we didn't grow up with this, but in other parts of the world people do. go through that, right? Like,
Yes, they do.
I read a book. So I'm a history major, and so I read this book. It's called Baghdad Burning, and it's this story of it's actually a series of blog posts that this girl was making, and it was during our the invasion of Iraq, and so it's her just describing what's happening daily on this blog. And it's just really like interesting to see because she's just like a normal person who has lived, in the Middle East, and now war is like right here, like full scale war on your doorstep, and talking about like people dying that she knew and how everything is changing. And I don't know why I thought of that book, but that's kind of what I was like thinking about a little bit. It's like with an undertone of this book, like even though it's like, man, just she's going through this war as a kid, like, because even younger, because we don't get Rickon's perspective in a Game of Thrones, right? And they have like dire wolves. I mean, here she has an ice dragon, but I don't know. I thought more so just like you do actually get to see more of this sort of perspective of war, but even from somebody younger than like what we kind of see with Arya in a Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's it's here's something I want to bring up just because I wonder what you guys think about this. You're talking about Adara and going through all of this war torn kind of thing. So in the very beginning of this, the first thought, I'm just going to talk about images that came to my mind because as I was reading this, I was like, images just kept popping into my mind from research, from things that happened in A Song of Ice and Fire. And one that's interesting, when I thought of Adara, even though she's little, right, and she's very young, I thought of the Corpse Queen, all right, the Corpse Queen in A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, let me tell you why, okay? And people are going to think I'm absolutely nuts, but this is just what's coming to my mind as I'm reading this. They talk about as she, Adara's father, they're talking about the blankets that they covered her with. So, and they said that the cold had entered Adara in the womb and that her skin had been pale blue and icy to the touch when she came forth, and that she had never warmed in all the years since. The winter had touched her, left its mark upon her, and made her its own. So when you go look up like the Corpse Queen, you look at the old the Night's King who married the Corpse Queen. I think of like an older version of Adara who never at the end of this, spoilers, her nature and things will change. I mean, that changes. But that idea of someone being touched by winter takes you right to the others. It takes you to this idea that they're marked and touched in some way. And I kept seeing that with her, almost like she was maybe not like what we saw in the show, but like almost like a white, who had been turned and stuff. Right. I was like, yeah.
So, you start seeing a lot of the inspirations that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say let's move into sort of it and viewing it with its connections with A Song of Ice and Fire, because my gosh, it's just so interesting. So again, he wrote this. I mean, I don't know exactly. It was published, right? Like 1980. So we're talking 17 years before A Song of Ice and Fire. And there are just so many things. It's just interesting to see that George had these ideas, right? And that he then started to write A Song of Ice and Fire, which he said, I had an idea. I had the first chapter, not the prologue, but the first chapter of a young boy watching his father have to execute somebody, right?
Yep.
And just from there, he just went, and then so much of this from the Ice Dragon, you can just tell. I mean, there's a land of always winter. There's an inn at the crossroads. He says things like dawn came, so that's just sort of a George-ism, but obviously dawn came means, a lot more to us tinfoil people in a song of Ice and Fire. And the Ice Dragon in A Song of Ice and Fire is like we view as the villains. But here it's like the good guy. Right, the Ice Dragon is the good. Yes, is the good guy, and the lands of always winter are the good guys, and so, the others in the show, we get to see the Night King and stuff like that. That's not there in the books, so we don't necessarily know that the others are evil. George says, it's all kind of all about perspective. I like to write gray characters. We still don't know enough about them to know that their intentions were always bad, or we still don't actually know that the Children of the Forest created them in the books. Yeah, we don't know that yet.
Yeah,
it may not go down that way. We don't know, but so it is just kind of interesting to see. To see some of these ideas he had, and then maybe he decides later, I'll flip it around and I'll have them be the villains.
Well, and hold on a second. Who is the true villain? As you say. So when you think about, am I saying it right? Hadrian's Wall, is that right? Hadrian, or is it Hadrian's?
Or Hadrian,
Hadrian.
Yeah. Hadrian's Wall. Yeah.
Okay. Either way, the visual of him standing there and looking north, and then looking south and saying, "Who's right?" Which the wall, we know why it was built, but like, were they who were north really the bad guys? Or, you have the Roman Empire, to the south. And I think the whole thing is happening with John. You look at John going, the wildlings are just like us, but there's something beyond them that I think we need to be afraid of. And then you go a step further, and perhaps these children of the forest who we think are good are actually the ones who accidentally create these other creatures, and maybe those creatures are just, trying to I don't know. It's so complex. As you say, it's gray, and we're not really sure, and it's all perspective. I love the point of view writing. I love to think about things from those different perspectives, because at one point we're rooting for House Lannister. The next point, it's like, now hold on a second. We were Starks to begin with, okay? We like Tyrion. Jaime's turning on us, but it's just. It's such a cool thing, and I think about that wall a lot, and I think about John moving them south, and then as you say with this story and the Ice Dragon, these people, the Fire Dragons we're rooting for them in A Song of Ice and Fire, but in this book we're not. In the Ice Dragon we're not, and so I'm not so sure he flipped it. I think that may actually be the way we're supposed to, even like A Song of Ice and Fire is going to shape out. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, and then in A Song of Ice and Fire, you think about this. Everyone views the wildlings as these absolutely terrible things that they would like kill on the spot, but you have the moon clans that Tyrion brings, and he helps them win the Battle of the Blackwater.
Sure. That's right.
And Tywin seems to put up with them. Okay, fine, let's go. So, but by all accounts, they're basically wildlings. They act like wildlings and everything. But people seem to be more okay with them than they are wildlings. They just view them as savages that live above, just because you live above the wall. That's what we talked about. Skagos is that's right on the line, right? And probably wildlings there. So it is interesting to look at that, and sort of the.
I've always thought of the wall as a barrier between, it's almost like a mental barrier for the people who live inside of the wall, like Westeros. Like, I've always looked at it like that, and it's kind of a metaphor for how we block out things that we don't understand, and how we block out things that make us uncomfortable. And like the wildlings way of life very much makes people uncomfortable. And then there's the magic beyond the wall, right? Like cold hands, and people mock Tyrion, and Tyrion actually mocks a lot of people at Castle Black when he's there. And then when he returns and he's like, hey, this stuff might be real, and then people are mocking him. It's just like, the wall is that separation that we put up as to what we perceive as reality. I've always kind of felt like that. And the idea of someone standing on that wall and looking almost like above the realm of reality and looking at both sides and going, well, which one's which? That's really, really cool imagery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, and this is obviously we're into full spoiler territory here. So I'm just going to read the last little paragraph here and sort of the synopsis of the whole thing. So if you don't want this 40-minute Audible book ruined, I guess you can pause or something. So, so this is like the the final third of the book. When Adara is 7, war comes to her land. Fiery dragons from the north come down and swoop down upon the peaceful farm that is Adara's home. There are riders attacking her family. She and her ice dragons fly toward them, and the ice dragon fights the other dragons in order to protect Adara and her family. The ice dragon defeats the fire dragons and their riders, but afterwards the ice dragon is nowhere to be seen. Only a pond that had never been there before, a small quiet pool where the water is very cold. After the disappearance of the ice dragon, the cold leaves Adara. She is then finally able to smile, laugh, and weep like other little girls.
Mm-hmm.
So is the ice dragon a good guy or bad guy?
Well, you know what it is, and I feel like, and I felt this at the end of the book. I feel like Adara is the embodiment of the environment of war. So, like how you were talking about people who live in this. I mean, it's a different reality for us, right? Like people that grew up in war times and are dealing with all this stuff. I feel like Adara embodied that, and then once that was lifted, she was able to enjoy life, even though it's told through the perspective of some magical thing where the dragon turns into a pond, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, well, really, I think what that's a metaphor is that once the battle was over, she was able to, and everyone will be able to laugh and weep and cry and have all the normal kinds of emotions rather than being in just such a cold, hard, bitter wartime.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
yeah, and
here you have the fire dragons that come over and destroy their peaceful lands. Well, that sounds an awful lot like Aegon the Conqueror.
It sure does.
Hey, we're just hanging out here.
Sure does.
And he just comes over. But you know what? The others, unless they may have been there. The others may have always been in the land. The land of always winter, and the giants and the children of the forest, and they all lived together. And then the Andals come, and then the first men come, and then the Andals come. And
yes. And then the Targaryens and Aegon's conquest. You're right. So the whole thing too is you look at the way groups of people, because I was just reading up on some of George's inspiration behind the series, and it's the medieval influence, all the different kind of battles. When you look at the War of Roses, when you get into political scheming and stuff like that, that's all kind of interwoven in here. But when you look at the overarching, how did groups of people move based upon big power struggles, and where were they shifted and where were they relocated to? That's the whole background for all of this. There's undertones of that these people, even though we don't really view them that way, but the children of the forest, the giants, and the others, I think the children were more southern, had kind of habitation. Branched out, right? Or down further south, yes. And they, because of the Arm of Dorne, they pushed further and further into maybe the area where the others were located, perhaps. Unless, as the show says, maybe they created them as something else. But I could see how the Land of Always Winter was a place that now the others, this has always been their spot. Now all of a sudden the children are moving up here. The giants are moving up here. What's going on? What's happening down south? Why are all these people coming up here into our territory now? Refugees, the children. The giants, the refugees on the run. So, and then a wall is built, and we can't even get them back down south of the wall. And then they're thinking, I don't think so. This was our place. So you get into those perspective kind of conflicts, and I think it's really, really interesting. By the way, let me know when you want to talk about the Ice Dragon, because is the Ice Dragon actually showing up in this series? I mean, that's the big thing. We don't know. It is mentioned by Old Nan, and that it being larger and all those things in this series, but we saw in the show an ice dragon, straight up, right? I mean, we saw like that was an ice dragon. Correct me or was I wrong? I mean, it's not maybe what Old Nan's describing, but it is a dragon that represents that it's fighting for the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the ice dragon actually in the series, it's people have. They can see it off in the distance, right? Like you can see it west of Westeros is where that's where people think of the thing. In A Storm of Swords, you have Jon, as there's a cold tunnel going through the wall at Castle Black. Jon thinks of an ice dragon. Jon compares the gusts of the wind at the wall to the cold breath of an ice dragon. The road beneath the wall also reminds him of the dark, right? And so Old Nan has told stories. There's people that think it's, the shivering sea and the white waste, right? That goes far off. So there probably are ice dragons.
I think there's definitely an ice dragon.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
Now, Jimmy, do you think this ice dragon? Do you think one of Danny's dragons is going to be turned like we saw in the show, or do you think it's like maybe they actually have their own ice dragon?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be its own ice dragon, and I think that there's like enough talk about like for instance Melisandre and the stone dragon and things like that. Like I feel like another one has to come into play. I just don't see Dany being in the same spots as she was in the show in the books, where one of her dragons would be compromised like that, unless if it was like during the final battle, or we'll call it the Battle for Winterfell, but I don't even necessarily think that's going to happen. But whenever the big battle happens with the others, I just wonder if maybe it happens during that. But I think I lean towards more of there being some other sort of dragon existing and it being summoned or whatever. So.
Yeah, because there is the whole, and when we did a patch face video, we talked about the idea where people theorize that if George was laying a seed for a dragon conversion, for a dragon to be, converted in some way, you look to your prophets or the people who are kind of seeing things in the flames, like Melisandre or Patchface, who saw a whole bunch of crazy ass shit down in the ocean. I mean, and he's saying things like, so Davos, this is in a Davos chapter where he heard a faint clank and clatter of bells. Quote, under the sea, smoke rises in bubbles and flames, burn green and blue and black. And people have they hearken on kind of the colors, like why green, why blue, why black? If the blue were yellow, it would have fit perfect with the dragons, but maybe that yellow dragon is turned to a blue dragon. So that's a stretch. You saw the show, and then you thought, all right, now that we've seen the show, how do we make this quote kind of fit? So maybe we're trying to kind of fit pieces together. I like the idea of there being a dragon like that was trapped inside the wall, or that was further the north than we've ever been, and shows up or whatever. I think that would be really cool. I think that would be awesome to kind of see that actually unfold on page.
Pretty much everything north of the wall is out, unless if we see a Night King in the book, which we won't. So I just don't see how that whole thing goes down where Dany's dragon turns or something like that. Like, I really wonder about the Horn of Winter. Like, obviously the big thing is that the wall would come down, right? Yeah. Like, is there something under the wall?
Yeah, right. Is there? Yeah.
Well, Jon walked under the wall and thought of an ice dragon.
Right. Yes. Yep.
Well, think of this. Some people think that waking a dragon out of stone, right? Well, there's an ice dragon in the wall, and that could be it.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
You have so in the world of Ice and Fire, when it goes to the final chapters and it's talking about all of the different areas, right? The Archmaester Margate, he's an Archmaester of the Citadel. There's one tiny little line, right? Has suggested that the tales of freezing mists, ice ships, and Cannibal Bay, told by sailors who have visited the Shivering Sea, are distorted reports of ice dragon activity. So the Shivering Sea is oh, that's one you have to kind of think about where it is. It sorts of turns into Arctic water north of Essos, right?
Yeah.
And so it is that sea that's north, that's sort of north of Essos. And so if you go that way, well, Euron and Victorian are trying to get they've got Dragonbinder, maybe.
Yeah.
Are they going to blow it and then suddenly, wow, we have an ice dragon, and then that would maybe you go down that route of Euron is sort of the end game. Euron is going to be the one that is able to then, maybe if he can control an ice dragon, can control the others. Yes. And then that's how you turn Euron into that big sort of main final
That
villain.
is exactly what I think. I see Euron being tied to the dragon, to the wall, and Euron being the big baddie. Like he is the, well, for lack of a term, the Night King. Even though I don't know if he'll be, leading the others. Who knows? But I feel like he's the last antagonist.
I mean, Gur's original ideas, way back in 1980, were a war between ice and fire dragons.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, I mean,
100%.
His original idea, 17 years before he writes Game of Thrones, he comes out with Game of Thrones, and so much of it goes all the way back to this book. You know, I did a Patreon episode where we've seen the original plan, which was supposed to be like three books, right? Then it turns into way more, but that was his original outline. But even before his original outline is this. It's the Ice Dragon book, and it's a war between ice and fire dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, let's also look at this too. The ideas behind fire and cold and ice, right? Ice and fire. I mean, it's Maester Aemon who they basically, because they took him out of the north where the cold and the ice was preserving him, right? The ice preserves and prolongs and whatever, and it was fire that would consume and destroy. Like that whole idea right there, just with one character, you can see how going south kills him. It shortens his life, and it's destruction, and it's one of those things.
Going south also killed Ned.
That's true, it did. That is for sure.
It kills a lot.
It kills
a lot of people.
I mean, the North are the protagonist in A Song of Ice and Fire, because we're Starks are truly the good guys. I mean, for most people, right? I should say
for most
some people would
yeah.
say absolutely not.
Yeah, but don't you think it's interesting that he writes this book, and our main character is a girl. A female main character who has an ice dragon, and then you shift forward and it's a girl. You know, you say John or Bran or everybody, but Dany's obviously like key. She's one of the main characters, and she has fire dragons. And then he calls the series "A Song of Ice and Fire."
Yeah, exactly. It is a song of ice and fire. Ice is first. It's not fire and ice. It's, you know what I'm saying? So it's an ice and fire. You know, it's a song. Let me real quick. I pulled up. If you go again, because I love going to a search of ice and fire. So the first like reference, I think, and I don't know if you read this yet or not, Matt, but it's in A Clash of Kings Bran 5, right? And this is they're talking about, do you know the way north to the wall and even past? That way's easy. Look for the ice dragon and chase the blue star in the rider's eye.
It's a constellation.
So they also see, they see the ice dragon in the sky. And by the way, you're chasing the rider. The rider of the dragon has this blue eye as well. It's all there. It's and
it always points
right there.
It points
early
north.
In. Yes,
the constellation
points north.
Yeah, points north.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. John thinks of it later. Exactly. So it's really, really cool to think. There is going to be, there's going to be.
Is John going to ride the ice dragon?
Wouldn't that be something? I mean, wouldn't that be?
He is a Targaryen.
Maybe. It's okay. I mean, in this story, Adara just goes up and touches at the age of 4 a dragon that was untamable or whatever. I think of the dragon seeds as well. Like in the histories of A Song of Ice and Fire, you had the dragon seeds, and who could approach a dragon and become a dragon rider? And there was something special about that. So, I mean, look at Bran. The way Bran changes to Bran actually looks like when he comes back in the show, he kind of reminds you of Adara a little bit, doesn't he? He's kind of cold, emotionalist. He doesn't smile anymore. All of a sudden, Bran, after he leaves the cave, is starting to look like, Adara in this series. Is he gonna ride a dragon? Will he be that knight that you know what I mean? Could that be the guy?
Dragon. Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God!
I mean, so he's a little boy, right? And then you had Adara, who was a little girl. He's just kind of flipped this around. You know, George is moving this around a little bit, but Bran's coming out of there with an ice dragon. So I don't know.
I'm just going to go off the rails just a little bit here.
Go ahead.
And all the Targaryen loyalists will be upset. But what if Dany does end up taking over King's Landing? She kills Fagon and she starts ruling with an iron fist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have that's it. It's basically you have like a dictator in Dany with going with fire and blood, and then you have a Stark, whether it be Bran or Jon, and they have that ice dragon. Like, what if that would be? I mean, I don't know. It's fascinating. I have no idea.
Yeah, the directions in which it could go. I mean, because Bran is prepped for something. I really don't think the showrunners had like even if that outline or that tidbit was given to them, they just don't know how to weave it in there, and nor were they planning for that, and so it just seems kind of crazy to them. They don't quite get it. So that's just a major difference in the show compared to our books. It's just not going to be even close. I would absolutely love to see some type of element where a real actual ice dragon faces off against fire dragons. Like not we convert one, but like if the rumors are true that there were once ice dragons, show me those in the book. I think that would be the biggest stunner. I would just be like, holy smokes. And you're right, Matt. He did it 20 years prior. He said, I'm going to have ice dragons fighting fire dragons, and not just some weird conversion thing. But yeah. So
that's going to be
good
interesting.
God.
Who knows?
It's going to be interesting, guys. Well, all right. Hey, go check out George R. R. Martin's The Ice Dragon. I think I got the Audible version for literally $7. And it's only like a 40-minute read. So I don't know what the conversion is there in terms of price. How many pennies are you paying per second of audio content? But it's interesting. It is a really interesting take to see some of his early ideas. And if you like the physical version, I like it as well. I have both the audiobook and the physical version. One of the things, as Jimmy said, man, there's animation, or there's pictures, I guess I should say, on every page, and the illustration is what I should say. I think it's all done really well. It uses this sort of soft blue, which I like. It's not just pencil. It's like they almost just used a bluish sort of gray colored pencil for the whole thing, and I really like it. So, all right, guys. Jimmy, where can people find you?
You can find me at the Fantasy Nuttwork, where I review books like A Song of Ice and Fire and Ice Dragon and all other types of stuff. So if you're looking for more stuff to read while we wait for Win's a Winner for the 11th year, come on over and get some recommendations.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for joining us, Jimmy. Ez and I will be back next week, back onto the reread and of course, more House of the Dragon news as it continues to come out, guys. So with that, remember that winter is coming.